and I want to get into the true innovations that are going to drive down or are currently driving down the cost in cell therapy manufacturing from an auto perspective, what have you. But the true innovations that are going to drive down the cost. And Mark, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. So I'll give you my point of view on it, but I'm sure you're going to get 3 different viewpoints on this one.
That's the best part.
You know, I do believe that innovation will come incrementally to autologous T-cell therapy and autologous cell therapies. But when you're talking about true innovation, where I see it coming is going back to kind of those first principles. On cell source, it really is looking for either pools of allogeneic cells as a source or a cell line. And I think the NK cell lines that are available actually offer that opportunity to look at this. And I think they're starting to show clinical outcomes that would compare to that of, for example, CAR T directed against CD19 in the clinic. But the second piece really is where we started out about the complexity of the genetic modification. If there's a way to actually avoid genetically modifying cells, but still redirecting them to your target for a reasonable period of time, I think that becomes a real innovative shift, both from a regulatory standpoint, but probably is going to reduce costs significantly, just thinking about it technologically, not from the standpoint of efficiencies or scales of economy and so forth. And I know that, you know, we've been working on at Acepodia a product similar to this, and I think it actually, while it still needs proof of concept in the clinic, I think it really will have legs within that. So that's kind of my initial viewpoint on this as far as the big innovations to come, is maybe more along the lines of simplicity within this.
Yeah, if I can comment briefly on that, definitely if those modifications can be omitted, if it would work without genetic modifications, it will be much easier also to get the product to the patients because of less regulatory issues. There are unfortunately different regulations, and at least in Europe, I don't know exactly how in the US, where it's probably more flexible, but in different European countries, there are much different regulations regulating these genetic organisms handling, and it's causing really delays, and you must be very well educated to be able to push it through this regulatory approval. There are different institutions in different countries allowing you to handle those genetic materials. So also from this perspective, it would be definitely easier to get it to more patients.
And my opinion is that really I would say the real game changer, it's at least for the large the indication with large population, it's really the switch from allogenic to autologous to allogeneic therapies, because we can really for the moment we all know that the costs are over $300,000 per patient, but really with allogenic therapies we can reach we can significantly lower the cost, and it could be really lower than $10,000 per patient, even less than that. So it's really, I would say, a true game changer. And if we only look at cell therapies, autologous cell therapies, the solution that we have that we talk about, like close and automated system, like streamlining the process by reducing expansion time or transduction time. So for sure, it will help to reduce the cost, but not to the same extent that allogenic therapies. But we could expect a strong reduction with cost lower than $100,000 per patient.
Thanks, everyone. And we'll get more. We'll dive deeper into that here in the next few minutes before we wrap up. But I do want to get to the third and final poll question. I think, Thomas, this is probably a good one for you to comment on, because we asked our audience what factors affect your decision to go with an off-the-shelf automation solution or a configurable platform. And we asked them to select their top two. We talked about GMP compliance, 31%, lead time, 24%, impact to manufacturing process, 34%, scalability, demand increase at 40%, and cost at about 26%. So that scalability demand increase at 40% it certainly came in the highest. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
in terms of their decision to go with an off-the-shelf platform.
Yeah, for sure. As we mentioned, in allogeneic, it's really we have to. It's really scalability and demand increase, which is, to my opinion, the most important parameters. Because for the moment, we are with autologous therapies, we are treating indication with several thousand patients per year, but we have to target other indication with a much larger population, and it will not be possible to do it with the current manual manufacturing technologies.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Thomas. I want to get to some questions from the audience, and I think Ludek, this might be a good one for you. Where is the autologous industry going for cell expansion? And this person is asking, is it a CSTR, hollow fiber, bag? Question mark. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, of course, depends on your particular cells that you aim to culture. But I think that very good yields, based on my experience, we are getting when culturing in a bags. There are different types of bags or bioreactors based on bags, where you can use different coating agents, and we very much succeeded with that. Hollow fiber, a little bit challenging. We have also personal experience with that, but it would be a long story. So I think that really these bags, I have very good personal experience and good experience within the team.
Okay. Does the panel feel that cost of goods sold can be reduced significantly via true end-to-end automation, and that they can minimize the theoretical price gap between auto and allo? And feel free, anyone can jump in with their thoughts.
Well, I'll start, but I think the other guys should probably comment as well, because they're closer to it from an engineering point of view. But I do think that if the end-to-end automation is set, the reduction in labor costs is, as Thomas spoke of earlier, I think can be a significant cost savings within COGS. I don't have numbers to quote here from any specific company, but labor has always been a significant line item within the autologous setting as we conduct manufacturing processes today. Even though most of those systems are closed, they're not fully automated and fully closed as was being suggested in this setting. Thomas also brought up the fact that you may be able to reduce your failure rate from particularly contamination, but I do think it's labor that's the bigger piece on that. But Thomas or Ludek?
Yes, for sure. The labor cost will be reduced. The overhead cost also will be reduced, but we will never reach, I would say, the price of traditional biologics or allogeneic cell therapies by having that. Because it will still remain a single lot per patient, but for sure it's a must-have, because one also of the challenge that we have not discussed a lot, it's as we need a lot of labor to produce autologous therapies. It's not so easy to identify and to recruit the skilled technician to do it, and for sure. it's a must-have for autologous therapies if we want to manage more than several thousand patients per year. But it will never reduce the cost to the same extent than the allogeneic therapies.
This is true. Of course, automation in allogeneic does not particularly mean that you would save your costs. In reality, you are implementing some automated device, which you need to invest as a capex investment. Of course, this is not causing you so troubles or huge influence because you can dilute this investment into several years. What is much more important is, of course, the price of consumables. And again, we are getting back to the point that we discussed about 30 minutes ago, which was about the demand that you have and your ability to negotiate the price for certain number of batches to be manufactured within that year and next years to make some plan. So, of course, as said several times, automation helps you with the robustness of your process, with the reduced process variability, with omitting these issues like sterility issues and these things, because usually it's closed system. But it does not automatically mean that you are reducing your cost, because sometimes what I see is balance, that you reduce your labor costs because you are putting some device in practice, but on the other hand, there is higher price tag for your consumables.
All right, thank you. Here's a question that I think, Thomas, I'd like to hear from you, and then Ludek and Mark, feel free to jump in as you see fit. A question about the very last but very critical step of the delivery and infusion of the product to the patient. How important is it to end with an almost ready-to-use product, but sometimes a frozen product that will require a reconditioning of the product?
Yes, for sure. It's also one of the challenge, because for the moment, we can only a few hundreds clinical sites could manage cell therapies, because it's quite complicated. It requires to have special storage equipment. They need to reconstitute the product and so on. So for sure, for the next few years, it will be critical to simplify those operations, and so it will be maybe possible in the future that to have the cell therapies available in almost all clinical sites.
Yeah, with logistics, I have to say that I cannot complain much. We invested to the projects that developed specific software that was really fitting our needs to manage all the logistics operations from leukapheresis until the final product and getting it to the patients. Of course, in the ideal world, in the ideal case, I think it's great to have both options, to have your final product either cryopreserved or even delivered fresh. For remote locations, it's better definitely to remote it, to deliver it in frozen stage. On the other hand, it needs some investment to thawing procedure of the product at the clinical site. But these logistics costs for frozen and fresh products could also differ. So this is again difficult to generalize. I think that both options could be of certain value. Depends on the location where you are aiming to deliver. But working again with reliable logistics partner who has rich experience in the field of delivering cellular therapies is definitely also a must. And for us, it was very much beneficial to invest into the logistics software that is managing that, and it's available for the clinicians remotely, and you can easily coordinate these things and even monitor online where your products are.
Yeah, the only other comment I think I would make is it's highly dependent, in my opinion, on what your stability is on whatever temperature you're transporting at. And I can speak most directly towards the oncology setting, where patients can come in rather ill. And so timing, it may not be able to be coordinated as easily with fresh versus frozen. And I think that there ends up being some conveniences on maybe not conveniences, some advantages versus disadvantages on both sides of the coin, as Ludek was suggesting. But it is something that I think, I don't think we have the perfect solution yet within that last phase in order to make this more ubiquitous for delivery in the healthcare system.
And I would like also to add that it will be critical really to try to standardize within the industry, because one of the comments from the clinical side, it's for the moment, the way of manipulating the cell therapies are really different from one company to another. And it's really difficult for them to adapt. So we should also work on it to standardize across the industry.
Thomas, that is probably one of the most, that should be spoken the loudest out of all of this, is just we are lacking formal cross-industry standards at some level for this. It's so true.
All right, well, we are coming to the end of our hour, and I think we could probably talk about this easily for another 3 if we kept going, but we want to wrap up here. Listeners, that's all the time we have for today. Hopefully today's event has given you the inside information you were looking for on ways to drive down the cost of cell therapy manufacturing. Before we go, thank you again to our esteemed panelists for sharing their expertise today. Thank you for listening to today's webinar, and a special thank you to Invitech for sponsoring it. Today's recording will be available on demand on Cell and Gene, and that's cellandgene.com and spelled out shortly. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.